Okay, we're live. We're live.
Ready to go. Can I have everyone's attention, please?
Charlie, I'm running the meeting.
Huh?
I'm running the meeting.
I know that,
Okay.
and I just, they're talking.
If everyone can please quiet down so we can get started.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Virginia Harger, Chairperson of the Shelton Planning and Zoning Commission. Today is Wednesday, November 20th, 2024, and the special meeting of the commission being conducted in the Shelton City Hall Auditorium and via Zoom is hereby called to order at 6:02 p.m. This meeting is also being carried live on YouTube. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? And I invite those participating remotely to do the same. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. I'll start off with a roll call of the commission. Please verbally indicate you are present when your name is called. Commissioner Kelly.
Present.
Commissioner Cristiano.
Present.
Commissioner Tiki.
Present.
Commissioner Motto.
Here.
Myself, Commissioner Harger. Alternate Commissioner McGee.
Present.
Ms. Castro, our Assistant Planning and Zoning Administrator.
Present.
Attorney Francis Teodoso, our Corporation Counsel.
Present.
Ms. Sarah Vernassos, our Recording Secretary.
Present.
Ms. Stephanie Charbonneau, our stenographer.
Present.
Okay. Ms. Castro has alternate Commissioner Apple signed in yet?
No.
Okay. Well, for the record, Commissioner Parkins is not available for this evening's meeting, and at this time, Commissioner McGee, you'll be sitting in for Commissioner Parkins. And
So acknowledged.
okay, and Ms. Castro, when Commissioner Apple has logged in, please acknowledge it so that I can have him sit in for Commissioner Motto. We go the alternate of the party that the commissioner is absent from is the one that gets seated. If that person's unavailable, the person from the other party on the commission fills in for the time being. All right,
Okay.
I'd like to, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'd like to know for the record before proceeding with our agenda items that Ms. Castro will act as a Zoom meeting host while commissioners will be able to make comments throughout the meeting. I ask that you please identify yourself and wait to be recognized before speaking to make sure we are not all speaking over each other and to make sure our recording secretary and our stenographer are both clear as to who is speaking. Tonight, we have the continuation of a public hearing. I'd like to share the public hearing protocol. Ms. Castro will indicate if any comments were received from members of the public no later than 24 hours before the start of this evening's meeting. If written comments were received, they will be read into the record. The applicant and or its associates will make the presentation. The commission can ask questions during the presentation or at its conclusion. The applicant and or associates can answer commissioner questions at the time they are presented or at the conclusion of the presentation. At the point in each hearing, chair asks for public comment. Those members of the public participating remotely via Zoom will be asked to use Zoom's raise your hand feature, and those members of the public participating via phone will be recognized after dialing *9. The public will be recognized to comment on the application, beginning with elected officials of the city, followed by residents. After you're recognized, please state and spell your name and state your address to assist the recording secretary and stenographer when doing the minutes and transcript of the public hearing. Each speaker has 5 minutes to present comments, which should address specific criteria of the zoning regulations, the merits of the application, and be new information, not a repeat of comments previously presented. If the public hearing is a continuation, public comments are restricted to new material submitted by the applicant after the continuation of the previous public hearing. Comments and questions should be directed to the commission, not to the applicant and/or his associates. Members of the public are expected to practice appropriate etiquette by being quiet, observant, and respectful. Disruptive attendees may be removed from verbally participating. The applicant's attorney and or associates will be given the opportunity to address any comments or questions after the last person from the public has been given the opportunity to speak. If the commission feels further information is needed from the applicant, the chair will ask for a motion to continue the public hearing. If a public hearing remains open, the commission is not allowed to make any public comment, discuss any part of the applicant's and or his associate's presentation, or receive any additional information from anyone. If the commission feels the applicant and or his associates have answered all questions and have addressed all concerns from the commission and or public, the chair will ask for a motion to close the public hearing. Staff will then schedule a discussion about the application at an upcoming commission meeting, during which time the commission will be asked by the chair and how it wants to proceed. So this is the continuation of the public hearing for application 2420, Dominic Thomas for Crown Point 2 LLC at 0 Bridgeport Avenue and 48 Long Hill Crossroads. Assessors map 50, lots 15 and 16 in an LIP zone for a planned development district for a mixed-use commercial development to include a hotel, restaurants, grocery, and retail. This application was accepted for review on July 10th, 2024. And the public hearing opened and was continued at the commission's meeting of September 18th. Documents posted for review on the city's website include the application for a PDD zone change, the original and revised statement of uses and standards, original and revised site and architectural plans, building renderings, the legend from the Shelton zoning map showing the future land use plan, various Google Earth maps, a letter dated July 31st from Attorney Thomas granting an extension to commence the opening of the public hearing, a memo from staff to the commission regarding staff inspections to the site to inspect permitted site work, a copy of the court's decision in 2772 BPR versus the Planning and Zoning Commission of the town of North Branford. Letters dated October 4th and October 18th, 2024 from the Connecticut Department of Transportation. Letters dated July 17th, August 14th, September 30th, and October 17th, 2024 from the Shelton Conservation Commission. A letter from Alderman Anglace, McPherson, and Bellamasi. Letters dated September 13th and 16th containing traffic engineering reviews from Solely Engineering. Letters dated September 13th and 16th from Brian McCann, the attorney for the Hawks Radio Association. September 13th from Michelle Ford, a soil scientist. A letter dated October 30th from John Guzowski, the Type Planning and Policy Group, regarding the suitability of the application, and a response from the applicant to Mr. Guzowski's letter. I'm not sure of the date of that, but it was uploaded to the city's website 2 days ago. And a letter dated November 8th containing a stormwater engineering review from Solely Engineering. There are also 14 letters from residents, 2 petitions from residents, signed posting photos, and certificates of mailing. Ms. Castro, has any correspondence been received within the time period for this proposal, but not yet posted to the city's website that we need to acknowledge for the record?
No, but I would also like to add Commissioner Apple came in at 6:09.
Okay, so for the Commissioner Apple, would you please acknowledge that you're with us?
I'm trying to find it, Jenny, hang on. I'm here.
Okay, let me see you. All right, so Commissioner McGee, you're being removed as being seated for Commissioner Parkins, and alternate Commissioner Apple, you are being seated for Commissioner Parkins. Could you please acknowledge that?
Agreed.
Okay,
So acknowledged.
alternate Commissioner McGee?
So acknowledged.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so would the applicant please identify yourself for the record and proceed? And as part of your presentation, would you please include a review of the response to Mr. Bukowski's report?
Attorney Dominic Thomas, representing the applicant. It's my understanding that since they filed their reports, I would prefer that the members of the Hawks Ridge reports, if they're gonna be presented, if they be presented to the commission, then I will deal with my response. And I uploaded the response of David Sullivan, and I think we have people from SLR, but the matter was continued for them to do their reports, and if they want to present them, they should go next, and then we will respond.
All right, without objection from any of the commissioners,
Aye.
is there a representative from Association that would like to present Mr. Guzikowski's material?
Your representatives, oh, I think she was asking.
Yeah.
Good evening, Commissioners. Brian McCann from the law firm Pullman Comley, representing the Hawks Ridge Homeowners Association. Attorney Thomas is correct. We have two professionals with us tonight, and I'd like them to speak and present their reports, and then maybe I'll give a quick concluding remark / summary. First, we have John Guzikowski from Tyke Planning and Policy Group, and I believe he is with us virtually.
Good evening. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can, sir.
Okay, thank you. Madam Chair and members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, my name is John Guzikowski. I am a professional planner and principal with Tyke Planning and Policy Group based in Vernon. It's my pleasure to appear before this commission again. I testified before you several months back, actually, along with Attorney Thomas on behalf of a different PDD a little bit farther up Bridgeport Avenue, and I'm happy to be back with you. My credentials briefly, I have over 20 years of experience with Connecticut municipal planning and zoning work. I've worked as a staff planner for over a dozen municipalities, written numerous sets of zoning regulations, plans of conservation and development, and multiple municipal affordable housing plans. I have worked extensively with both private development applications and special development districts, such as you're dealing with this evening. I am currently the government relations officer for the Connecticut chapter of the American Planning Association, in which role I have assisted in drafting numerous pieces of legislation concerning planning, zoning, GIS, housing, and transportation. And I'm generally recognized widely in Connecticut as an authority on local land use policy. And I've submitted my credentials for the record as well as my testimony. I was asked by the neighbors at Hawks Ridge to review this proposed development and zoning modification relative to Shelton's policies and plans. We reviewed the development application, the planning, the zoning regulations, the Shelton Plan of Conservation and Development, both 2006 and the 2017 update. And our review and report has been submitted for the record. It's relatively long, and I appreciate it if you've gone through it. I'll try to summarize very, very briefly. PDDs are a discretionary act. This is something that you have broad authority to approve or deny. And the Plan of Conservation and Development and the zoning regulations are very, very specific about the purpose of landing PDDs and developing them. There are many details that you were required to consider and make findings on the record about the appropriateness of the PDD. And these are detailed in my report and as well as the testimony of the neighbors. The bottom line is this, that PDDs are intended to be landed in order to facilitate a higher quality of development that's both more appropriate to the specific area, sensitive to the area's context, the neighborhood, and the environment, and would result in something better than would be allowed under the current underlying zoning, which in this case is light industrial. In this case, the proposed PDD does none of those things. It's a development in an identified development corridor. Bridgeport Avenue is identified in the POCD as a development corridor. And it's currently just a hayfield or a cornfield, and obviously, development is preferred to not development. However, you have been asked and you are required by the zoning regulations and the POCD to determine if this is an appropriate development and if it's better than what would be allowed by the current light industrial zoning. The current zoning is better for this site. And in this case, there is nothing context sensitive, neighborhood friendly, or environmentally friendly about the proposed PDD and the development that it would enable. It's a fairly standard off-the-shelf strip commercial development, restaurant, shopping, hotel, that has no creativity, no innovation, and particularly no sensitivity to the environment or the surrounding neighborhood, particularly the residential neighborhood. I understand Mr. Attorney Thomas, in reviewing our commentary, has pointed out numerous times that he doesn't believe that Hawks Nest neighborhood, which was created by a different PDD, was the right decision or the most appropriate choice for the area that it ended up in. That is water under the bridge. It is an established and important residential neighborhood that whether or not the previous Planning and Zoning Commission approved it appropriately or perhaps inappropriately is completely irrelevant. It is a neighborhood. It is your neighbors. It is stakeholders and important residents of Shelton. They deserve respect. They deserve consideration, and they deserve the respect that the zoning regulations, particularly the PDD regulations, has provided to them. To disregard their rights to live in peace and live adjacent to a development that is sensitive to the fact of a residential community is incredibly important. And the proposed PDD provides a wholly inadequate approach to sensitivity to the underlying neighborhood. The other note that Attorney Thomas made in his response relative to the fact that in the current light industrial, you could have a trucking terminal of a manufacturing facility on this site, which he points out would be also inappropriate. And to that, I would agree. But the fact that the current light industrial zoning might allow something else that is also inappropriate does not mean that this inappropriate PDD should be landed there. It's really more an invitation for this Planning and Zoning Commission to take a look at their zoning regulations and maybe figure out if a trucking terminal facility is truly appropriate in the light industrial zone in the first place. So again, and we have detailed in our report a number of key shortcomings and reasons why the PDD will not create a better circumstance than the underlying zone currently allows. And that is the burden of the applicant to prove that their situation creates something better, creates something more context sensitive, creates something more harmonious. And it does none of those things. And so failing to meet that burden of proof should be a strong vote in favor of the status quo, which is to say, do not change this zone at this time. And I will close my comments there, and hopefully people got a chance to review the specifics of the report. Thank you.
That's it, Mr. Guzekowski?
I'm sorry?
Is that it?
That is it for now. I'm happy to answer any questions that the commission may have or that Attorney McCann may wish to elaborate on.
Okay. Are there any questions for Mr. Guzekowski by the commissioners? Okay, if not, Attorney McCann, who do you have next?
Yes, up next, we have Matthew Baldino from Soli Engineering Group, and he's going to speak to the peer review of the traffic report as well as the stormwater engineering report.
Okay, thank you.
Connected to that, I think that's gonna reach. I think that's pointed to that though, right?
Oh, you can turn this on.
This will probably pick it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, just press the rinse.
Can we switch them?
Yeah. Thank you.
Press it down.
Can everyone hear me okay?
Up, up, sorry.
Oh, up. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes,
Okay, good evening, commission members. For the record, my name is Matt Baltino. I'm a licensed professional engineer, certified professional traffic operations engineer, as well as a roadway safety professional with Soli Engineering here on behalf of the Hawks Ridge community with a review of both the traffic engineering as well as the stormwater engineering report that were prepared associated with this application. I do give the caveat that there was additional information submitted on this application with regards to traffic or response to our comment that was not provided until 3 o'clock this afternoon. So I will go over my initial comments, but I've not had a chance to fully detailed review of those comments that were provided this afternoon. I would like to start with the traffic engineering comments that we have provided. First was with respect to, I will give a brief overview of this, given that our comment letter was provided in advance of this meeting, but a brief overview. With regards to the trip generation that was calculated for this, a response from SLR was provided, which indicated there was additional revisions that were made to identify a portion of that property. Apologize that there's not a site plan before you right at this moment, but there is that long retail strip center that does have a drive-through component abutting it. So that was revised to be accounted for, but some of the findings in the report are under the review of the DOT with respect to the Office of State Traffic Administration. We acknowledge that that
Ms.
is a.
Baldino?
Yes.
Ms. Castro has the ability to pull up a site plan. Is there one in particular that you can identify that she could look for?
So just the site plan that was submitted by the applicant, I believe that was last revised in September.
Okay.
Take over, sorry. Have to take over his host on a different computer.
Want me to pull up?
Yeah, you're faster. Thank you.
Huh?
Please.
All right, hold on a second. You have full screen. We just opened it. I didn't have it open when we open it now. Yeah, go back in and shoot. Oh, showing is not turned on.
Okay.
Thank you, Attorney Thomas.
Is that John?
If you mind going to the site plan, I believe that's the survey, so
Okay.
the next page would be.
Here we go.
And then, no, well, I think this differs from the next page. Or the colored version's good. I think that was updated, so you can go back to that. Thank you.
Sorry?
Perfect, thank you.
Want me to blow it up any?
If the commission can see that, okay, that's okay. So, as we go through this, you should note that the traffic, trip generation was updated, in this most recent response, and is pending review from the Office of State Traffic Administration with respect to step one. It's a three-step process. Step one, is the volume approval of both the traffic that they have, calculated existing on the roadway network, as well as the trip generation volumes associated with this development. They did assume 50% of fast food users would come from traffic that is already on the roadway. It is our experience with the DOT that is somewhat high value that is accepted by DOT, but they've indicated that they have that approval. With respect to kind of going through the comments here in order, the next comment was with regards to the speed limit that was reported on Long Hill Cross. And while I do acknowledge that this does not affect their operational analysis, it should be noted, I do apologize that I was not at the last meeting, but it should be noted that there was consideration and discussion regarding construction access off of Long Hill Cross. And the speed limit and the speeds associated with that roadway do impact a safety analysis of the driveway. The temporary driveway would be for construction activity. Construction vehicles would require adequate sight distances to be able to adequately see the traffic on Long Hill Cross. So that comment was made with regards to the discussion of a temporary condition to allow for construction vehicles and to ensure that we protected the safety of the vehicles traveling on Long Hill Cross. So kind of going through this with respect to, again, they did indicate that there was the OSDA process was ongoing and under review. There was also much discussion with regards to DOT improvements at Long Hill Crossroads, which are ongoing, but there was not a full breakdown of the proposed improvements at that intersection. And with one of the discussion points that was brought up in the traffic assessment indicated that they recommended that an additional exclusive turn lane be provided at the southbound approach of that intersection. So that was one of the improvements that was identified that would help increase and allow additional capacity on the roadway that was not necessarily included in their recommended improvements that they have agreed to for consideration. So that was a point that we wanted to bring up. But just to provide an overview of the remainder of the comments, kind of tying this back to the regulations that are before you as part of section 34 of the planned development districts for PDDs. So sections of the PDD kind of outline different findings that the commission would find in order to establish the PDD. And section L of the report requires that the written traffic report be prepared and that the surrounding street system and traffic controls can accommodate the existing traffic, directed traffic from the proposed development, and projected traffic from other approved developments that may impact the system. So this traffic report is very essential to the commission's tools to be able to review and provide an evaluation that at this point in this stage of the development, that this PDD is suitable for this property. The traffic generation is essential to understand to what extent this property can be developed without adverse impacts to the roadway network. Now, while many of the comments that were provided, there was indication that this would be reviewed by the DOT. And while we agreed that this will ultimately be reviewed by the DOT, we feel that it is the applicant should present their findings with the substantial backing and include the information that they will submit to DOT and have indicated so in this report at the time for this commission in order to provide this commission with an evaluation of and an assurity of what is going to be built and being proposed. So of those things, this application includes a traffic signal at the intersection of the main site driveway, as well as ultimately 3 curb cuts onto Bridgeport Avenue. And with those involves wetlands and watercourse crossings in order to access the roadway. One of the recommendations would be that the traffic engineer provides a signal warrant analysis. So as traffic engineers, we can't just put traffic signals anywhere. We have to ensure that they're warranted and the need is there for those. So the most widely accepted traffic warrant is an 8-hour warrant, indicating that that traffic signal would be necessary based on the roadway volumes, based on the site generated traffic volumes for 8 hours. And without that information, without providing the daily trip generation for this development and an hourly breakdown for this development, there is not enough information in this report to indicate that the traffic signal would be warranted at this location. And while the applicant does acknowledge that that would be prepared and provided to the DOT, it is ultimately a very important factor in this development that is shown before you. I'm sure Attorney McCann will elaborate on the process and procedure here. But at this stage, under the PDD regulations, this is the public hearing portion of this development. Moving forward, this application would be approved for a site plan approval for the uses for any minor modifications, which would come later. We feel that the access to this site is considered a major modification. It is something that should be discussed at this point in the development. The access to the site is something that is essential to understanding the capacity of the site to handle this additional traffic. So we would request that additional information be provided, as well as consideration. The DOT will require evaluation of site circulation, which is also site circulation and access, which is also outlined in the regulations of the city of Shelton. That this includes delivery vehicles, fire, emergency access vehicles, being able to adequately navigate and access this site. The site does propose a grocer tenant, which would require WB 67 or a tractor trailer to access the site. And in order to do so safely, we would recommend that the applicant reviews and evaluates their site layout to ensure that these maneuvers can safely occur on site without impacting the safety of the pedestrians and vehicular travel paths internal to the property. Additional, just to kind of summarize these comments, there is a lengthy response comment letter here. But one of the DOT has thresholds under the OSGA, which is the major traffic generator certificate. And that threshold is 15 seconds of delay is what they indicate for a level of service D or worse is something that would be require mitigation by the development. There are numerous scenarios and instances where this criteria is not met with the mitigation that is proposed as part of this application, which indicates that the impacts associated with this development cannot fully be mitigated with what is proposed to go with this application. So we would request that be further evaluated to understand if the size and scale of the development can truly be supported by the adjacent roadway, even with the improvements that are proposed by the applicant, which would again ultimately be reviewed by the DOT and require their approval. So there is some uncertainty to that process as well. And while I do understand that process is independent of this process and outside of the control, and must occur after the planning and zoning process, there is a level of certainty that they can provide with the additional information that they would and have indicated would submit to the DOT. I feel that information is very relevant to this commission to understand and evaluate the adequacy of this roadway to accommodate that traffic. I will also touch on a letter that we submitted earlier that was not included in the response with regards to the proposed application. And as part of the PDD standards, they are establishing a parking rate for this site. And this will kind of bridge into the stormwater management side with the coverage of the site. But there's information that's available in
Excuse me,
City
Mr.
of Shelton.
Baldino,
Yes.
what letter are you referring to?
Our September 16th letter that was submitted to the commission.
I want
So
to
in
make
that
sure
sep-
that we're on the-
Yep, so in the September 16th letter, we did outline that the city of Shelton has numerous parking requirements for the various uses that are proposed on this site. The parking rate that is proposed in this development is all inclusive of all of the uses that are on site with 4 spaces per 1,000 square feet. And while, you know, that is somewhat consistent with some other things that have been presented and shared within the city of Shelton, this development is somewhat isolated from the rest of the commercial developments. And there's inadequate information to fully evaluate that would be an adequate parking to support the demand. And given the coverage on this site as presented, there is a lot of impervious coverage on this site, which leads to and a large retaining wall on the eastern side of the property that would kind of prohibit future additional parking should the need arise. So in the event that this parking rate, which is something that the commission has the ability to establish as part of this application, should the parking rate be inadequate to support this site, there is limited ability for this application because it is constrained by the water course on the western side and a retaining wall. And ultimately the PDD boundary, which is proposed as part of this application, to expand should the parking not be supported. So I think it's important to understand, can all of this development be supported with the parking that's provided? And that was touched on in that letter. So I did want to provide an overview of that is something that is proposed as part of the PDD standards and should be evaluated because there is limited availability in the future to adjust that should that need far exceed what is provided. So moving on to the stormwater report that we prepared, or stormwater letter that we prepared in review. So the stormwater letter was prepared by our office dated November 8th. Apologies. The stormwater report that was submitted and available to us through the online website did not provide drainage area mapping. So there was inadequate information for us to fully understand the calculations that were prepared associated with this. So I do want to note that there is additional comment may be provided once this additional information is available. So this comment letter is relatively short, as there was some information that was discussed in the report, but not fully contained. So to start, the coverage calculations in this report exceeded the 60% that was proposed from the PDD standards. So it was unclear that to the extent that they were proposing to develop this property. As discussed, the 60% is part of, not only is it part of the standards of the PDD before you today, it is part of the PDD standards as a whole within the PDD regulations. So it's important to understand if that criteria is met. Following on to the stormwater evaluation indicates they evaluated the 5, 10, 25, 50, and 100-year storm events. But then the summary table kind of lists the 2 years. So it's a little unclear on what storm events were analyzed. But the Connecticut Stormwater Quality Manual, which was updated just recently in 2024, does require a reduction of the 2-year storm event to 50% of the existing conditions in an undeveloped site, and that to be considered to the maximum extent practicable. Given the report and the information that's provided in it, I don't feel that there's adequate information to understand if that is being met in this application. And I think it is important to understand if they're able to fully meet the criteria within that manual. Additionally, the engineering report as prepared did not include a evaluation of the stormwater conveyance system. Again, while these elements could be worked out at a later date, we feel that this is imperative to be handled now during this portion of the application, as the zoning regulations within the city of Shelton do require a detailed engineering report be prepared at the time of the PDD submission. So under section 34.5.2, section M, a written engineering report by a qualified engineer addressing storm drainage and flooding, including stormwater management plan, utility services, soils and geology of the site, and sediment and erosion control measures be employed. hydrological, geological conditions, seismic monitoring provisions as may be applicable to the proposal. We do feel that these are applicable to the proposal that's before you. And it is imperative that these be addressed at this time to ensure that there is no impact associated with this development, which could not be further mitigated. In order to understand the zoning of this property and the extent of development before you, it is important to understand what this development and what this site can handle as a whole. Specifically, the stormwater manual does acknowledge low impact development practices, as does the City of Shelton zoning regulations, does indicate that the low impact development practices should be employed to the maximum extent practicable. There's little discussion of that in the engineering report. As prepared, the plans that were submitted do not include a full detailed analysis of the outlet control structures and the underground detention systems. Now, the City of Shelton requirements and regulations require an evaluation of the geological conditions. And that's imperative in order to ensure that the design that's presented and the reduction of runoff that is presented in that report can accurately be achieved. So that's understanding, completing test pits and infiltration testing to understand if the stormwater that's going into underground detention system, big holding chambers, can either infiltrate into the ground or how that's going to be managed. And without understanding the geological conditions of the site, it is unclear on how one can evaluate those systems in their entirety as they're proposed. Additionally, the City of Shelton zoning regulations does require, at the time of the PDD, evaluation of the utilities that are available within the site. Section 34.9, findings required for the adoption of the PD district. Section bullet point G, the existing and proposed utility services are adequate for the proposed development, and the utilities and drainage have been so arranged as to not overburden the capacity of the facilities connected therewith. The engineering report evaluates the sewer, has discussion over the sewer flow generated by the proposed development. As engineers, we use design flows that are available within the Department of Public Health design criteria. And the Department of Public Health classifies each of these individual uses differently. Restaurants are calculated differently. They generate more flow than a general retail. General retail usually doesn't have a lot of sinks, usually limited bathrooms. Customers are coming and going, not staying for extended periods. Restaurants generate significantly more flow. The engineering report evaluated this entire property as retail space in their generation. This dramatically results in a significantly lower evaluation of what they anticipate the demand for this site to be. Therefore, it's information that is not available to identify if there's adequate sewer capacity available for this development. Something that should be considered as part of this PDD application is if there is the public utilities available and capacity within them to handle this development. And as mentioned, the information that was provided with regards to sewer did not classify each of these individual uses, which significantly results in a lower number of gallons generated of waste than what it would actually be generated by a development as shown in these plans. Additionally, there was little discussion and will serve letters were not provided with respect to the other utilities that would be available to serve the site, to understand if this site can adequately support what is proposed. And with that, I'll conclude kind of the evaluation of the traffic and engineering and pass it back to Brian McKinn.
Before I go, are there any questions from the commissioners for Mr. Baldino?
I just have a few.
I have a question, Commissioner Amato. You mentioned, that we have to figure out the parking, which is something we spend a lot of effort on all projects, but I don't think I heard you say one way or the other what you thought of this parking plan.
So with respect to the parking, there isn't information, as engineers, we have what's called the Institute of Traffic Engineers, parking generation manual, which evaluates each of these individual uses. That information is not contained within the reports that are submitted to adequately represent whether or not this parking field can support the proposed use. So we would request that, the applicant provide sufficient information for the commission to make that determination.
But we have our own parking regs.
Correct. And your own parking regs do identify individual uses
Right.
and individual requirements.
Okay.
So under this PDD application, it's a blanket 4 per 1,000 square feet. It's not use specific. So to classify it as a whole, there really needs to be further evaluation. It's also, it's a great. This center as designed on this plans, spans it's a rather long site rather than a deep site. So that kind of leads to these individual parking fields, as you can kind of see on the plan, associated with each individual use. So typically in traffic engineering, when you do a blanket parking rate, that assumes that there's going to be a lot of cross use of those parking spaces between the various uses. As shown on this plan, as you can see, working kind of south to north, on the south side, there's two restaurants, fast food restaurants that have very individualized parking. So to not hold the parking rates for those individual uses may result in inadequate parking for the demand. As you kind of work through, you see the retail one kind of has parking associated with it, with the grocer, limited parking in front of the western side of the grocer. So to apply a blanket kind of assumes that there's going to be a lot of cross use of these parking spaces. But given the layout of the site, the proposed connectivity, I don't know that it would be an accurate representation to say that someone would be parking in the fast food use and walking over to the grocery store or the hotel, even in that matter.
Well, the hotel would, the parking would kind of be over, not normal, but it would be the standard of people staying there compared to a restaurant or whatnot where you
come and go.
have a sort coming up, right?
Correct.
Exactly.
Oh.
No, one other question is that from what I understand is that the stormwater and also your traffic report, you feel is not, the traffic report that was given, you feel it's not complete.
Correct.
All right, now, the people that gave the traffic report and whatnot, they may feel it is complete, so where do we?
Yeah, so as commission members, you have to evaluate the information that's prepared for the professionals, both at the town level, the applicant level,
Right.
and from us on a peer review perspective. I think, to the traffic report, let's start there. I think that the response that was prepared identifies that there is additional work and analysis to be performed, that they identify that they would prepare and submit to the DOT. So I think we are kind of in agreement that there is additional information to be provided. So in regards to that, we just would respectfully request that information be provided to this commission at this time, and it be evaluated. With respect to the traffic report,
Right.
I think, that there's information that's provided. There was a response provided to many of the comments. But overall, there was the summary of a lot of this would be provided to the DOT and not this commission. With respect to the engineering report, with respect to utilities, I think we have the information that supports that those numbers are not necessarily indicative of what we would see on this development site.
Well, utilities, you really won't know until the plans are basically completed.
So there's when it comes to utility design, there's kind of two aspects to it. So there is what gets done at like an MEP level, like a mechanical engineering or
Right.
plumbing level,
Yeah.
which is done based on fixture counts, which is based on exactly what you're saying, a lot of the plan development.
Right.
But the Department of Public Health does not view those calculations in that same manner. They review it based on seat counts. They review it based on square footage. So we have the square footage of the grocer. It's on this application. It's part of this application. We have architectural plans that were submitted as part of this application for the restaurant spaces that include seat counts. So there's certainly information available to do those calculations and present the utilities based on those square footages.
Okay,
With respect to the stormwater, I think, you know, it's apparent that there will be a stormwater conveyance system associated with this site. I think, you know, the design of it requires additional information be prepared. The city of Shelton zoning regulations require evaluation of the geological features. I think we are trying to make the commission aware of some additional items that are required under their zoning ordinances that could be added to those reports in order to kind of solidify the designs and things that are prepared in that report.
you also talked about construction, the construction vehicles on Long Hill Avenue or Crossroad. I don't see them going in that way
So,
because of the hill and so on and so forth. I see most of the construction traffic on Bridgeport Avenue, in and out.
well, I understand that, and that may be a condition of that the commission imposes, but given the current situation, I did drive by the site again on my way here. There is an access curb cut kind of on Long Hill Crossroad, which
Yeah,
has been
I
utilized.
saw that
So,
too, but that's just for the upper half. That's not for the lower half. How do you get down to the lower half? That's the whole thing.
so I think that's something that the applicant can elaborate further on. There is certainly, you know, given its current state, there is certainly concerns in how to access the site from the western side of the property, given the brook.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Baldino? Anybody participating remotely have any questions for Mr. Baldino? Okay, Attorney McCann, thank you, Mr. Baldino. Attorney McCann, who do you have next?
That's it. I just want to make a couple concluding remarks, if that's
Sure.
okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Chair. First, just quickly to Commissioner Kelly's comment, I've heard through the applicant that there is a construction ingress and egress proposed off of Long Hill Cross. I'm not exactly sure how that will mechanically work with the slope, but that's what I heard through the applicant's presentation. Okay. The way the Shelton PDD regulation is written, the rezoning is dependent upon a site plan, which not only satisfies the zoning regulations and standards, but which the commission feels comfortable that the rezoning will not create problems for the community in the neighborhood. I think this is precisely why my clients, the Hawks Ridge Association, has devoted its time and energy on a critical review of the initial site development plan. You've now heard from Mr. Baldino in terms of the adequacy of some of the issues with the parking. I read in the responses to Mr. Baldino's report about how the traffic routes were designed for passenger vehicles. Obviously, the commission's going to want to feel comfortable that emergency vehicles, that trucks are not going to pose a problem in the site. So those are the kind of things that the Hawks Ridge critical review, I think has focused on. As far as the Mr. Gostowski's report in the POCD, there are several. I think even in addition to John's report, there are many suggestions and references in the POCD itself, specifically to harmonizing with surrounding land uses. Why is that important? It's a rezoning. These people that moved into the neighborhood next to an LIP piece of property. That is now potentially being pulled out from under them, and a new set of regulations, a self-designed set of regulations, is being put in. page 9, I just pulled out a few. I actually found sites in addition to what John did. Page 93 of the POCD, the intent of PDD should be to create development that is superior to the underlying zone while keeping in harmony with the surrounding neighborhood and community as a whole. Page 95, limit PDDs to projects that produce superior development that is compatible with surrounding properties and overall community character. You know, the PDD doesn't say anything about, well, what about PDDs that someone thinks should never have been granted, or PDDs that are residential in an area that isn't predominantly residential? They speak to harmonizing, they speak to compatibility, and they speak to making specific accommodations on the site to account for that. What are those things? Those things are appropriate buffering. Those things are making sure that the traffic is not going to impact the neighborhood. Those things are making sure that there's not a construction entrance and ingress and egress that's not directly adjacent to a residential neighborhood. One thing that I thought was just kind of void in the application materials, although as Chairman Harder said, there are quite a few, was specifically some sort of depiction, whether written or illustrated, of the surrounding land uses. I just went on the city's GIS. Alexandria, is it okay if I pass this out?
Yeah.
Can it later be put in the record?
What is it that you have, Mr. Attorney McCann?
This is just a, would you mind passing me this? This is just a snippet from the city's GIS, which shows the Wells property as well as some of the surrounding land uses, including but not limited to the Hawks Ridge neighborhood. One reason why I think this is
Attorney McCann, excuse me, but there are several commissioners who are participating remotely this evening. Is that something that Ms. Castro will be able to
I don't think so.
on the screen?
I
It's
don't,
from a document.
probably not, right?
I've uploaded a much larger one, which I'm gonna be showing in a few minutes.
Okay. We could upload it after the hearing or tomorrow.
If
I'll
Attorney
just sort of,
Thomas has something, then it should be in the list of materials.
I uploaded today, it's an exhibit and I'm ready to show it on the screen. It's a similar type exhibit. Obviously, this exhibit can be brought up. If you go on the GIS, you could
Yeah, bring it
bring up this anyway,
up. Right.
which is
No,
what
I
I
think
did.
somebody from the applicant or Attorney McCann's side needs to put this on the screen for the use of those that are participating remotely.
Let me stop my share.
I'm sorry, Alexandra.
No, it's okay.
I would hear.
Try to put it up.
Yeah, everything's so-
I don't even know what the camera is, do you? It's in the owl.
Yeah,
That's right.
I tried. It kind of zooms and moves a little bit. See,
Split almost.
That's weird.
Ms. Castro, are you
The
attempting
online
to find
commissioners see
something? Or
I
is
am.
it Attorney Thomas?
I am.
Okay, good.
All right.
Thank you.
No.
No, him putting it in front of the screen. Little frozen in there.
Well, is yours, Dominic, is yours loaded? No.
Mine's loaded. I can load it. I mean, I have mine labeled and I have a much larger
It's
area.
okay. Navigating the.
Well, you're at what? You're at 400 feet?
Yeah, if you just
Yeah.
pan to the.
There it
you
is.
go. Perfect.
You just go across the street and just kind of zoom in on the property a little bit.
I don't know if you do that on GIS.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I know, you have numbers, 400.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
400, 200.
Oh, I always just use that zoom in and out on the
Oh,
bottom.
For whatever reason,
It's just being finicky.
yeah,
Yeah,
Okay, no worries.
where do you want me to go?
That's fine. Yeah, that's
The
fine.
highlight buttons?
No, you're good. That's good there. So one thing that I did was I took a look at the GIS with the aerial view layer. And I mean, you could see the 109 unit development that is adjacent on Long Hill Cross. And actually there's at least one additional home that is on the bottom of Wells View, which must have been constructed after this. I think it was a 2019 aerial view. And also in the map, at least that the commissioners in person have, I also clicked on the wetlands mapping overlay, which is the purple strip on the western side of the property, obviously along Bridgeport Avenue. Well, why is this important? Well, as I just explained, as Mr. Gostowski went over, that there is an intent in the POCD to harmonize with these existing land uses. Obviously, this development will likely be an impact for the Hawks Ridge community. You could see the proximity to the property. We've just discussed the construction ingress and egress directly adjacent on Long Hill Cross. Also, the topography, obviously you can't see the topography from an aerial view, but the topography, the elevation is much higher. They are perched above the development. Even, I'm sure you've driven by plenty of times, as I drove by tonight to come down Bridgeport Avenue. You could see the houses lit up through the property. Since the property's been denuded, you could see up into the Hawks Ridge community. I mean, this is important. And it should be considered on a couple different levels. Number one, there are extensive regulations regarding buffering. There are extensive regulations, zoning regulations. 42.7.8 is a lengthy landscape regulation. Buffering along streets, buffering along incompatible land uses, buffering specifically for commercial uses. And also tying back in that piece of POCD that we've been talking a lot about. Page 64 of the POCD states that one of the intentions, things planned for, is improving buffers between incompatible uses. Buffers consisting of existing undisturbed vegetation, landscaping, combination of both, can reduce or eliminate conflicts between incompatible land uses and protect environmentally sensitive areas. So I think that, you've not only is it prudent, I think it's something that you've planned for. On the site plans, at least that I've reviewed, there is a single line of vegetation that's proposed along, I think, the first third, maybe a half length of Long Hill Cross. I don't think it's reasonable to assume that this will buffer much of anything from the residential to the commercial property. There's also an area where there currently is no development proposed on the upper third of the site, upper quarter of the site. It was originally part of the PDD application. The PDD was revised to exclude that portion, but I think it at minimum just visually explains that there is land that can be dedicated to buffer. There is land that could be dedicated to open space. Ideally, that land would be between the Hawks Ridge Association properties and the PDD. That might require a slight reconfiguration of the site, but it's demonstrative that the land is there that can be dedicated for those purposes. You've also heard numerous concerns about the impact that the PDD will have on not only the adjacent neighborhood, but as well as Long Hill Cross in general. It's obviously a serpentine road. There's been plenty of testimony about how it's not only well-traveled, but it's usually traveled in excess of the 25-mile-per-hour speed limit. You've heard testimony about how there's a school bus stop at the bottom of the hill. These are things that concern the residents. These are things that can easily be addressed with even with a PDD, but perhaps with some site redesign of that PDD. And also, as Commissioner Kelly pointed out, it's not even as if the construction ingress and egress is necessary on Long Hill Cross. I think at best, it's just the most economical option, because I'm sure that the developer wants to get started with construction immediately and get going with the site design. But as far as necessity, there are proposed entrances off onto Bridgeport Avenue. So long as those can be, or at least one of those can be constructed, then that would provide a potential source of construction ingress and egress, which would preserve not only that residential street, that residential neighborhood, the bus stop, the potential dangerous situation with cars speeding on a serpentine road, but it would be very feasible and prudent. Lastly, the regulations in the POCD have a lot of references to and the regulations, excuse me, the preservation of open space, the protection of wetlands and natural resources, and the adaptation to existing topography. Here, in this PDD, we haven't seen a plan that mitigates the wetland impact. As far as adapting with existing topography, I have a plan that essentially plans to level it and put a 25+ foot retaining wall in the back. It's not exactly adapting with the existing topography. As far as the wetlands, the parking lot runs right up to the wetlands. The parking lot actually sits over the wetlands in at least 2 cases. The regulations recommend referral to the Inland Wetlands Commission. We haven't seen that. I think it would certainly be helpful. And I did just take a quick look at one PDD that just for comparison's sake, one PDD that this commission did approve. That is that of Shelter Ridge Associates. I was able to get that because it was appealed and in Superior Court, so the facts are available. The site, if anyone cares, is 69 Connecticut Law Reporter 409. It's a 2019 Superior Court case. And some of the things I noted from that are there were 24 of 124 acres were preserved as dedicated open space. That's approximately 20% of the lot area was permanently preserved as open space. Number one. Number two, a full environmental report was done on the property. We don't see that here. Three, the court noted to adapt to natural topography of the site and minimize rock excavation needed to prepare the site for development. The site is planned as a series of smaller development parcels separated by topographical breaks to adapt to the existing topography. Lastly, steep vegetated slopes protect Mill Street, a scenic road, while topography, wetlands, and dedicated open space protect the westerly boundary of the site, setbacks, open space, and topographical buffer the northerly property boundary. So all those things that I just said, the open space, the environmental considerations, the adapting to topography, the buffering between adjacent properties, especially with incompatible land uses, they were done. They were done there. It looks like the commission did a really good job and the court recognized that they were done there. And we just don't see them at all in this current proposal, but hopefully that can be fixed. So thank you for your time.
Commissioner Harger, I have a question.
Does anyone have any questions for Attorney McCann or any of the experts that did the peer reviews?
Yeah, I have a question. Commissioner
Hey,
Kelly,
Commissioner Kelly.
your question. How is an LIP harmonious with the residential district?
Well, I don't know if an LIP is.
The reason I'm asking is that there's certain part of the land that's staying LIP. Now, if you put a factory or something like that up there, there's a maximum height of 40 feet you can build. That's right across from Hawks Ridge. So I in my mind, I just don't see how it's harmonious to looking at a building. And
Looking at what type of, looking at two fast
looking at
food restaurants
or
and
whatever. In other words,
two drive-throughs with
you're looking
with
down,
lights and
but
traffic 24 hours a day. What?
basically, no,
Gentlemen, please don't speak over each other.
I'm sorry.
Our
you're
recording
looking down.
secretaries can't
something.
understand that.
And also, as far as the speeding, yeah, that's a common thing anyhow. And the speeding and the traffic and whatnot, that's now. It's not later on. I mean, it really is now. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, I think those are two really important things. And I think that what one of the sections of the POCD actually makes reference, I don't know if I could find it real quick, but it actually makes reference to efforts being made to improve in land use decisions, improve traffic. And I believe it specifically calls out Bridgeport Avenue. I thought that
You're not
was.
gonna improve that until you have a lot of tickets. Let's face it.
Okay, anything else? If not, Attorney Thomas, are you ready?
Yes, I think first, I believe, again, first of all, with respect to the engineering, we received a report as stated around November 8th or so. Manny Silva was not able to address his responses on the engineering report. Dave Sullivan is here to address the traffic, but with respect to the engineering report, I just want to say something, and that is, this is a PDD. It's a two-step process. This is the initial concept development plans. In this case, in this PDD, it is actually a three-step process because we have the initial concept development plans, which we need to work on, getting approved and seeing, but then our entrances are over wetlands, over a water course. So our next step is to go to the Shetland Inlands Wetlands Commission, which we have to go through because of upland review disturbances and because of the fact that we are having crossings. In addition to that, and this does relate to traffic, and I'm gonna leave that to Dave Sullivan. Your traffic access, while needing to be, as it has been, in all the PDDs I've done up and down Bridgeport Avenue, needs to be presented to this commission. As you are aware, it is in the control, much of the control of the DOT, and then it reaches a higher level, as in this case, where it must go for OSTA certificate, which is, they have substantial controls, and I'm sure Dave will do that. But with respect to the engineering aspect of it, and the aspect of the engineering report, I do want to point out one thing, and I was confused thoroughly by it when I sent it out. There is a reference in the Solely report about impervious coverage in 60%. There is no 60% impervious coverage limitation or maximum. The paragraph 2 is confusing in the regulations, in the PDD regulations. There is a 60% rule concerning building coverage. There is no impervious coverage. You go to the underlying zone, and an LIP impervious coverage maximum is 75%. And we have below that. The numbers went up when we moved the PDD line down to the retaining wall. And with respect to how it's developed and how you have to develop it, I noticed that nobody bothered to make the comment that one of the reasons you have to develop this site the way it's being developed is because in 1975, the city of Shelton decided to put the sewer main through the middle of the farmland. And we are before the WPCA tomorrow for the first step to refer out the moving of the sewer line. And I will address some things related to that more, but I just wanted to point that out. Manny Silva would be able to respond to all of the comments, and I will, one other comment I will address to on the engineering is to point out that having done a few of these PDDs, the statement of uses and standards is the new zoning regulation. Now, if you don't address it in the statement of uses and standards, then it you go to the underline. On the parking standard, this has been evolved through this commission and prior commissions over the years. And one of the biggest things they've learned is the area of shared parking and the effort to reduce impervious coverage, pavement, which has impacts on drainage. I find it somewhat contradictory to say we like LID zone, we like a development that is low impact, but why don't you put more pavement? Well, sometimes when you're opposing something, I know you have to fire shotgun blast, but you gotta watch out, the pellets might hit you, okay? And in this situation, you can't be contradictory. But we will address, and our engineer will address the engineering, he just did not have time. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Dave Sullivan to make some comments about the traffic response. Then I will address the planner's comments.
Good evening. It's again for the record, Dave Sullivan from SLR. So I thought maybe I'd hit some of the bigger picture topics and give some perspective to our response, and I'd be happy to go comment by comment, but I think you'll see in the big picture that we have responded, but much of our response as was indicated, is that these are things that will be sussed out and refined as we go along. So the first thing which is important is the questions. There were several questions sprinkled throughout the document having to do with the trip generation estimates. Uh, we took those to heart. There were some inconsistencies between our report and the site plan. We looked at those and refined our estimates, and we thought it was at that point, rather than, our word against somebody else's word, we said, let's get our DOT arbiter involved here, and we sent our new estimates up to the Bureau of Policy and Planning to review our site traffic estimates, and they essentially gave us a thumbs up on them.
All right, Mr. Sullivan, can I just make sure that what you're referring to is the letter that has a date of November 20th? That's
Yes.
okay,
Yes.
so for all the
Correct.
commissioners, notification about that. Okay,
Correct. What's important and didn't really come out in the presentation from the peer reviewer is that when we made all these refinements and made the submissions up to DOT, got their approval, it's actually slightly less traffic than we had previously estimated, which is important, as we go along. So that was the trip generation portion. We took to heart some of the comments. We reflected them, got them approved by DOT. Sightlines were an issue that were brought up. There was some question about the speeds and construction activity. Suggestion was maybe go 5 miles per hour over the estimates. We redid our sightlines at 10 miles an hour over the speed limit, or 50 miles an hour, and put those on the plan that we've recently submitted to OSTA for step one, and we meet the sight lines for 50 miles an hour. There was some questions about who's paying for the improvements, and perhaps it wasn't clear, but I think I was even asked last at the first hearing. DOT is doing some equipment upgrades and pedestrian upgrades at the intersection now. So they're doing that. All of the mitigation, the left turn lane, the timing changes recommended throughout the study area, the turn lanes along the site frontage, the traffic signal, all of that stuff will be done by the developer. So hopefully that's clear. We're not recommending anything that wouldn't be done by the developer. The there was some discussion about the 15-second rule requiring mitigation. It's a little bit misleading. What it actually says is that's one of the criteria where they think you should evaluate the need for mitigation or roadway improvements. And in fact, we have. And in both of those situations, the 15-second rule is part of the reason is the mitigation. For example, when we're adding the southbound left turn lane, granted, we have one movement that gets worse, but we're taking levels of service that were previously Fs and making them As and Bs. So the net result, granted the 15-second rule, all that's supposed to do is be like a flashlight. If you have one of these conditions, you have to consider mitigation. And it even goes on further to say if you don't think there's any reasonable mitigation, explain why. So that's what the OSTA and DOT is telling us, not that if there's a 15-second rule that you must mitigate. So I just wanted to clarify that. So we are, in fact, going to reanalyze these things. And let me just explain in the big picture why we didn't rush to reevaluate everything at this point. First and foremost, we have submitted a detailed report for traffic volumes that are actually slightly higher than we're going to go through the OSTA process. We will not be recommending anything different to OSTA that we've recommended in the report that we've already done. Now, there were some comments that we have acknowledged in our response that we will certainly either take another look at in terms of some of the signal timings and things like that. But at the end of the day, the revised analysis will have to be submitted to DOT with additional analyses that will be required. We will have to do turning movement analyses. We will have to do queue length analyses. We can't propose to DOT the turn lanes we're proposing without the queuing analysis. So these things will all be part of step 2. Now, the reason when there's mitigation such as we're proposing here, that OSTA requires us to go with a 3-step process is for the very same reason that we didn't rush out and for essentially the same traffic volumes, reanalyze everything and then wait for another comment that changed one thing and reanalyze everything to no avail. They take a 3-step process because they want to walk and not run into the mitigation packages. So step 1 is essentially, let's look at the estimate you're making for the land uses you're proposing. Let's look at the traffic volumes that you're using. Let's look at the growth rates, even though they provided the growth rates to us. Let's look at all of those things and come to an agreement that, yes, these are the traffic volumes you should be analyzing. Then once you get that approval, you get a document from them saying your planning volumes are approved. Then you give them the step 2. And step 2 is really the meat of these analyses. So typically on a simpler project, maybe a smaller project, we could just take our traffic study and give them that traffic study with some supplemental information. In this particular case, partially because of some of the good comments that were provided to us, we're going to refine those analyses and all that information a little bit, not to the extent that it'll change any of our recommendations or any of the mitigation we propose. It'll essentially be additional requirements of OSTA to justify the request for that mitigation. So big picture is we have where it was prudent, we have provided affirmative and forward-looking responses, and most importantly, with the traffic generation estimates. And we're not kicking the can down the road because we don't want to deal with it. The proper protocol is to get all of the information. Your commission, for example, may have comments which ultimately affect what our analysis that will go to OSTA will be, for example. So to reanalyze for lesser traffic at this stage of the game doesn't make any sense. But we do acknowledge in our responses that we will address all of the concerns and all of the questions that were put forward. So that's the big picture. Be happy to talk about any of it or get into more detail. Our response letter is 10 pages. I'd be happy to walk through the comments and response, not read the whole thing, but I'd be happy to do that if you thought that was useful.
Does any commissioner have any questions, comments or concerns about the response dated November 20th for Mr. Sullivan at this time?
Thank you.
Okay, Attorney Thomas, do you have somebody else?
Yes, me. I will be responding to the comments of Tish and planning and the response to Attorney McCann's comments. I will begin, I have other ones, and I gave one to,
I think I do have one.
and, I'm gonna begin with,
Attorney Thomas, you're talking about the letter dated October 30th? From Tice that the responses were put in red?
then I did a response that just had highlighted, notes, comments on it. I'm gonna review that.
That's what you're
my
reviewing,
comment
okay.
And response to that, and I want to, get back. Hold on, get back to the, and first of all, what I'd like to begin with, because, and I'm gonna screen share here, because, again, this is something you've seen before, there is a constant reference to the P O C D. And as I often say, the P O C D is a valuable document, it is an advisory document. And unfortunately, sometimes people slip up and use the word regulations. They are not, they are suggestions. And it was brought up at the very beginning about this site, and this was an exhibit. What I have on the screen for you was an exhibit that I presented, and I just think it's important to really have another look at it, especially considering Mr. Gurkowski's reports and the comments of Attorney McCann. This is the logo or the box, the dialogue box, whatever you want to call it, that is on the future land use plan and in the P O C D. This was not amended at all by the 2017 update. And as you can see, black little dots indicated future plan economic development area. And when you go to the future land use plan, the black dots along Bridgeport Avenue are on the site that is being proposed for development and the site across the street that was referred to by Attorney McCann, on which I have a great familiarity since I am the lawyer who did the PDD and argued the case that Attorney McCann quoted from and went up to the Supreme Court, establishing the right of Shelton to have its PDD regulation. And yes, there were all those things in the Shelter Ridge development, which currently is not going forward because it's in litigation. It's a 121 acre parcel of land with a gigantic vernal pool at the top that had to be addressed, and a substantial trail system along the top in the 121 acres that topographically, compared to the site before you today, it would be considered flat if you compared it to the 121 acres across the street, which are substantially sloped. And has another issue involving utility lines going across it. So the development had to be attributed to that. The amount of site work were that to have gone, or if it ever goes forward in accordance with it, is, I think the correct engineering term would be ginormous, even with the reduction in the site. That is a site that, yes, it had a lot of issues and we tried to incorporate them. And from the very beginning, because of the vernal pool, we had to address those environmental issues. And I admit that's what we did. On this site, the environmentally sensitive area, if you want to call it that, is Wells Hollow Brook, which, as I've said before, and I continue to say, and I think I won over the state on buying the land by saying this, it is a drainage ditch for Bridgeport Avenue right now. And the proposal that we have told you we will be doing and are working on, because we have to update it. We did a proposal for a stream restoration corridor and address the issues of the crossings, which have to be done by bridges where the pylon, where the supports of the bridges are outside the area of the stream, outside the wetlands, but in the upland review area. That is all gonna be presented to wetlands as we are working on it. And related to wetlands, and related to OSTA, we don't know, this commission, we are making a proposal. And I'm not saying or suggesting anything, but this commission may say, at some point, can you do 2 entrances off of Bridgeport Avenue instead of 3? Or can you move an entrance? Every time you do that, you are impacting how we go to wetlands. So that's why we go to wetlands after the concept stage. And before the final site development plans, as we are required to do. It is also why, as Dave Sullivan explained, you are doing as much as we can for traffic purposes, because at that point, it'll change if there are any changes in the locations of the entrances and everything. So that area, let's keep in mind that the P O C D identifies the property we're talking about, even though it is LIP, as a future economic development, and specially designates it. So I'm not foolish enough to say that because the POC says that, that means you have to do anything. It's an advisory document, and advisorily, whatever, it says it's a future economic development area, meaning you can have a change of use that creates a positive economic development force in it. Now, getting to view the entire site, whoops, Dominic should have stayed there. Getting to view the entire site, I have an exhibit, which I will. Okay, this is, and I misspoke, it was not GIS. This was from a Google, I tried to use Google Aerial to get the most current. And just to do the same thing Attorney McCann was gonna do. What is the neighborhood? Quote unquote. Well, the neighborhood that is involved here, you have Hawks Ridge, as you see here, and I know you may not be able to see it totally, some of the commissioners have. You have Hawks Ridge in the middle, you have the site and development. You have Crown Point Commercial Center, very short distance down the road. And then going the other way, you have Split Rock Center, you have CX Plaza, you have, and I didn't even go as far down as Fountain Square. You have the hotel, going beyond Crown Point, a short distance down the road, you have Walmart, you have Big Y. Now, these are all that I've just mentioned, PDDs. All commercial PDDs on Bridgeport Avenue. And some of them, such as Walmart, Crown Point Center, and even Big Y, all about residential areas. And have survived. The residential areas have survived. And I'm sure there are many people in there that are happy that they have the services going back and forth. That live in the mobile home park, the Woodland mobile home park, that live in the area along Buddington. When Walmart was done, there was a lot of concern for the Buddington Buddington Park, I think it's called condos, condominiums that were right above it, and we had to work with that, and steps were taken. Our client is proposing, we have shown you a section. We have shown you the enormous, again, Hawks Ridge is looking at the fact that they're above it as a detriment. But for buffering purposes, even when the deciduous trees have lost their leaves, they are substantially higher above, and really the impact is 2 homes. When you go up there, if you drive around, the impact is 2 homes. And you gotta also understand that when you talk about impact, and they talk about it, the parcel across the street is zone LIP. And I've repeated, and I know you're sick of hearing me say it over and again, the uses in there are a matter of right, and they will exit onto Long Hill Crossroads. Now, and I'll get into a little more detail on Mr. Gutkowski's, but Mr. Gutkowski has said, and Commissioner Kelly questioned a little bit, that LIP is much more compatible. I would be glad to talk to my client about getting an LIP tenant for the upper portion, which we can put right across from Hawks Ridge. Because according to the planning report, that's more compatible. And that could be the buffer between Hawks Ridge and the lower development, if that's what they want. Not sure that's what they're talking about. But again, when you're opposing something and you shotgun your approach, that's sometimes what happens. LIP is not more compatible with residential. The other thing is this, I want to correct a few things. I never said, and I didn't say in my comments, that the Hawks Ridge is a bad PDD. I was one of the lawyers who worked on the approval of Hawks Ridge. I was one of the lawyers who pushed back against the fact that maybe it should be kept LIP. And I am someone, as a planning attorney, a land use attorney, that goes around to other towns. And I just did this in Newtown on a large piece of land, when they asked me, what does your client want to do on this large piece of land? I said, please take a ride down to Shelton, to Bridgeport Avenue. You got a lot of places you can grab a bite to eat, and then go up and take a look at Hawks Ridge. That's what we want to do. But what I was pointing out in here was that if you read the POCD and you read the regulations the way Mr. Gutkowski is proposing, then you would have never approved Hawks Ridge. Not that it's a bad thing. I thought it was a good thing, and I think it still is a good thing. My client has made it clear, and I want to be clear. In order to begin construction, he needs to have access off of Longhill Crossroads. And then, because there is the slope, as the property built, the reason is, we can't just go and lay a bridge down. Wetlands Commission, OSTA, all have to go through those approvals. District 3 have to be done. So, but we understand that precautions would have to be taken. But Long Hill Crossroads is an access road to light industrial development. I'm not sure if it's still called that, but you have Honeyscell at the bottom with trucks coming in. And I know that because it seems like every time I go on Long Hill Crossroads, there's a truck pulling in there and I've got to slow down. The same thing applies for Modern Plastics. Then you cross Route 8 and there's substantial amount of LIP up there. And those employees exit down there. We understand it. That's what it was zoned. Not by developers. That's what it was zoned by the town to get it in. And so my whole point is, Hawks Ridge was appropriate, and this is appropriate because it's economic development, what we are proposing. And it's my position that it is obviously much more compatible with residential than the other uses that are a matter of right. And a matter of right in such that they would be exiting onto Long Hill Crossroads, such as a manufacturing facility with a freight and materials trucking, a lumber and materials terminal, motor vehicle repair garages, cleaning and dyeing plants. Those are the ones that are, when you're doing a report, you need to read the Schedule B or Schedule A and find out what are matters of right. What are the uses that are across the street from you? And when Hawks Ridge was built, you had a light industrial building right across the street, and you had a light industrial building right down the bottom of the hill. And this proposal is a proposal that has uses in it that are more attuned to what people who live in a residential area, has more services to what people that live in a residential area need. They don't need to go over and visit the trucking terminal, but they may need to want to go and eat in a restaurant or shop in a store. The other mistakes that are in the thing is just that I would point out, there's a statement in here about 34.1 that he references the fact there's an and you need both things to be a PDD. If that was the case, you would not have no PDDs in downtown. because none of them border a residential, they're not buffering. If you read the whole paragraph and you read it clearly, what it clearly means is these are the two areas you can have BDDs. But the issue ends when you read the first one, because we are in the Beachport Avenue corridor, which has been a designated area for PDDs since they were founded. So but the other thing that is most important to this commission is that with respect to the land use of this property, PDDs give you much better control. Not LIP. LIP, there are certain uses that you have, that you would have control because it's a special exception. But as of right, that's why I gave you the BPR case. As of right, you have very, very little control. And I don't know most light industrial development. They are going to design it, so they are probably not having to worry at all about doing anything to Wells Hollow Brook or crossing it. So they can just come out as Honeysell does, as Modern Plastics does, right on to Long Hill Crossroads. Now, my client is proposing a row of arborvitae. And we're subject to anything else, that any other type of thing. We all know that we have to make sure we get the approval of Commissioner Maddow to make sure we have the right plants going. But I just want to point something out, and not that it would be the same thing. First of all, there was a tremendous grade difference, number one. Number two, during the May through October time period, there is a relatively heavily forested area that is behind Honeysell and up to those two homes that are up there. Granted, it changes when the leaves fall off trees. So I don't know if a different type of tree would be good, but green giants can grow very large. In 2010, 11, when you approved what is now the marketplace, there was a discussion about planting at the top along Buddington Road. And of course, the comments were made, we can see through though, even though they were, we can see through those evergreens that you're planting there. But it was approved and the plantings were done. A few months ago, you had before you the McDonald's proposal, a modification of the PDD. And the question was, can the McDonald's sign be seen by Buddington Road? So I had to go up onto Buddington Road and see, and I drove down Buddington Road, and all of a sudden, because I hadn't been there in a while, there was a giant wall of green evergreens. And couldn't see, if you recall, I presented photos to say, see, there's nothing to see other than the evergreens. Even small buffers will work. Now, our clients could have taken the position, there's a sufficient grade change, we don't need to do it, but they're going to do buffering. And so we are making the effort. The client will work, we will work as fast as we can, once we get to move things, to get the approvals from what? From DOT, OSTA, from District 3, to be able to put the bridges in and utilize that access. But the initial site work has to be done off of that. And we will make, and what conditions involving requirements for police or safety. Of course, the clients have to follow that. They don't want to create any problem. But keep in mind, it would be absolutely no different than if it was an approved light industrial building being built. Or a warehouse would be special exception, but any one of those uses would have the access off of Long Hill Crossroads. So my client's going to be careful in presenting it. But the effort here to utilize the P O C D to say you shouldn't have PDDs in this area because of the approved PDD at Hawks Ridge, which is a very good PDD, is disingenuous. But not only that, you have to look, while PDDs are not precedent in any fashion, your planning, as part of your planning, you look at the area and how you plan the area. And when you look at how you plan the area along Bridgeport Avenue, keeping in mind that Bridgeport Avenue, as you flow up from the downtown, is an area that is commercialized and was cutting through residential areas. Then was cutting through farmland, which happened to grow very large office buildings at some point. But Route 8 then cut across when Route 8 went in and blocked out other residential areas. But they exist right over Route 8. So when the corridor was developed, the commercial bank and the office bank of the office area of the corridor was developed in proximity to residential areas. And the Shelter Ridge project, that was one of the biggest issues, and we tried to address it. But they were right up against it in the back, and there was a vernal pool. In this area, what is the issue that my client has to deal with? The biggest issue he has to deal with is the sewer line, which creates a tremendous problem in how you develop it and shrinks the amount of development. In 2017, we wanted to put apartments on the top and eventually withdrew that application. And you had commercial down the bottom. We have reduced the amount of commercial down the bottom. The other big issue with this site is when you're doing that, you have to enter from Bridgeport Avenue, which means any developer is now committed to improvement to Wells Hollow Brook, to enhancements to it, because you're gonna have to get wetlands approvals, and to a substantial amount of traffic mitigation along Bridgeport Avenue, which in the end will be helpful to the people of Hawks Ridge by making at least some area of Long Hill Crossroads safer. But I think that from a planning perspective, when you consider what the underlying zone is, this is the best way to go. The fact of, I do not dispute peer reviews. Peer reviews are good. And as Dave Sullivan said, he takes to heart the comments that are made with respect to it. With respect to the parking, I'll certainly have them do it. I am an anti-asphalt person. I can pull up the site plan right now. I don't even know how many actual parking spaces. There may very well be more than the 4. We have to deal with a hotel that has a parking minimum, a restaurant that has a parking minimum, the grocer that has parking requirements. They have to deal with that. But I would venture to say, probably if you looked at the parking, the numbers may very well exceed the 4. I have tended, and you know me in appearing before you, to put in less parking, because in all the experience I've had, and that's why I gave you that exhibit that we presented to show the 12 years of looking down through Google Earth of the parking of the shop of Shelton Square, Stop and Shop, TJ Maxx, and ShopRite, to show you how that done. I also pointed out to you the studies that were done of the marketplace and everything like that. Certainly, if this commission feels that parking isn't appropriate, you can look at it. But that's my parking regulation, which you set in the statement of uses and standards. That's where you set it. And you look at it. And you can read study after study. It says one of the reasons why you have shopping centers that have enormous fields of asphalt, which are not low impact development and not good for the environment, is for years and years and years, planning and zoning commissions would take a shopping center and make you count the number of spaces for each separate use without using shared parking. And this commission has shown the intuitiveness going over the last several years in projects to recognize the shared parking and recognize the fact that in the commercial area, it's the looking at shared parking and putting an appropriate parking regulation is much better and is more low impact development than just having you do a mathematical number for each use, which I understand the point that was made up of the solely traffic engineer, that yes, the person down in the fast food is probably not gonna walk all the way to Texas Roadhouse. But in the center of that area, the people that are going to the retail and the grocer are going, that's gonna be much shared parking. So looking at it that way, that is why I proposed the 4.0. So I think we'll address it, and keeping in mind that this is the concept plan. We are gonna have to address wetlands next. We are gonna have to address the final site development plan. And as far as storm drainage, keep in mind that the focus in storm drainage, you also have your ordinance, I think it's ordinance 58, whatever, that has to be complied with in Shelton, in addition to all the other requirements for storm drainage. And as far as the WPCA, you've been through this before, you know that the Shelton WPCA requirement is, don't talk to us, don't give us numbers, don't do anything until you have your final site development plan approval. And that's been the rule over the last few years anyway, and believe me, I know that rule. I mean, litigated issues related to it. Okay, so with that, I think, you know, we have addressed the comments. The only thing left open, and I will say that, you know, we got the reports at the beginning of November. I know Dave Sullivan and SLR worked as fast as they could. If the commission wishes for our final report from the engineer to continue this to the December 11th, just to wrap up the response, we would have no problem with that, but I leave that up to the commission. Thank you very much. On. Is Jenny talking? She's muted.
Marilyn, you're on mute.
Thank you very much. Does any commissioner have any questions for Attorney Thomas? All right, hearing none, then. We'll go-
Commissioner Harger, I did have a question, if I could.
Sure, go ahead, Commissioner Upple.
Attorney Thomas, Attorney McCann has represented that there were required reports that had not been included or are lacking in substance in this application. Can you address these, and will they be submitted, and will you be submitting additional information?
What? I'm not sure what reports you're talking to. There are certain things that were referred to with respect to the storm drainage, and the engineer, again, unfortunately, our engineer couldn't do it, but he will address it. We submitted a storm drainage report. We
Yeah, but
submitted.
there also was a geological report.
Frankly, and I would let the engineer do that. I've been doing this for a lot of years. The only geological report, it's usually contained in the plans, as is the soil erosion and sediment control. Keeping in mind that with respect to certain, if there were structural testing that had to be done, that's usually done at the final site development stage. Once you get your approvals, you know where your buildings are going to go, then you do your testing to see if it's appropriate. But there's no, and I'm going to defer somewhat to the engineer, but I think the only case I can recall in which we submitted geological information along Bridgeport Avenue was the one across the street at Shelter Ridge. And this goes to show you how everybody's paths cross. The traffic engineer on Shelter Ridge was solely engineering, and the peer reviewer was SLR. So You know, what goes around comes around, I guess. But yeah, no, that we haven't, I mean, I let the engineer, Manny Silva, address that, and that's why I said it could. He just didn't have the time to, address that, but I can't recall one in which, at this stage of the game, the geological, a geological report was necessary.
Okay, any further questions for Attorney Thomas? All right, we'll move on to the public portion and Ms. Castro, we're gonna, as I said earlier in the evening, we start first with elected officials of the city. If there are any elected officials who wish to address the commission but have not yet signed in on a speaker sheet, please come up to the conference table and sign in. Okay, gentlemen, you can all go back to your places in the audience.
No one.
No one? Okay, then if there are any elected officials participating remotely that would like to address the commission on this application, please use Zoom's raise your hand feature or dial *9. Are there any elected officials, Ms. Castro, participating remotely?
1 second, the remote froze.
Okay, sure.
No.
Okay. All right, Ms. Castro, you have the speaker sign-in sheet. Is there anyone from the
Well
public
done.
who has?
I got it.
Huh?
The
I'll do that.
other person signed up is Mike Fidel.
Okay, so Mr. Vidal, would you come up to the conference table and present your comments? Please remember that those comments are restricted to only those materials that were submitted by the applicant since the open continuation of the public hearing on September 18th. Identify yourself for the record and proceed.
My name is Mike Fidel, 36 Hawks Ridge Drive, Shelton, Connecticut. Can everybody hear that?
Yes.
This started for us in August. We found out about the PDD application. I have 109 units. I have about 250 residents that live in Hawks Ridge. We've been trying to find a solution to what we want compared to what the developer wants. We had a meeting with the developer's attorney, Attorney Thomas, with our attorney, myself, and Chris Douglas, who you've heard from previously. We've never opposed the development per se. We wanted changes in what they're doing, reasonable changes. That's what we've asked for. So to be told publicly that we're opposing development, that's not really true. We just want it done in a better way for the neighborhood, for the people that live in our development, and for the city of Shelton. There's improvements that can be made compared to what was offered in the beginning. Now, that development is too big for the land. It just, and I want to tell Attorney Thomas, we counted 636 parking spots. That's a lot of parking. Attorney Thomas, to me, is a very interesting person. He's very entertaining.
Let's not get
And-
into personalities, Mr. Fidel. You have to
I meant-
speak to the
I meant
merits
that-
of the application.
I meant that as a compliment.
Okay, we do not
But
permit
as
that.
far as far as the application goes, we go back to a letter that was sent out to a lot of our owners from a blasting company and a inspection company that was sent out on August 10th. That was the first volley that came at us. That was well before you even examined this PDD. One of our main requests of the developer and the commissioners here is to reconfigure the intersection of Long Hill Cross and Bridgeport Ave. At a previous meeting, Attorney Thomas said that there's plenty of land there. If you get out of your car there, there isn't enough land. the asphalt ends on the sides of the street, and then you go 1 or 2 feet and you're going downhill into a culvert area. There's no extra land there for these things. It was said earlier by Mr. Sullivan that this should be paid for by the developer. We advocate for that. It should not be an expense for Shelton taxpayers. It should be the developer. We've asked for an engineered buffer. That was talked about. That's fine, as long as it's gonna be green giant arborvitae, something like that. Now, at the September 18th meeting, Attorney Thomas said, and these are his words, there will be no access to the development from Long Hill Crossroad. That's what he said. A few minutes later, he outlined a proposed separation of 3 acres adjacent to Cinto Office Park and the development. Well, that 3 acres has to be accessed by either helicopter or by Long Hill Cross. So on one hand, you're saying no access from Long Hill Cross. On the other hand, you're saying access from Long Hill Cross. I don't go along with that. Now, on September 18th, Attorney Thomas referred to Wells Hollow Brook as a drainage ditch. Tonight, he moved on and he's calling it a water course, which all his experts on September 18th called it a brook or a stream or a water course, which it is. In September 18th, Attorney Thomas said that he was contacting the state of Connecticut to get access from Bridgeport Ave. That's where we want the construction to come from. That's where we want the development to use. We don't want Long Hill Cross, which was properly defined today as a serpentine road. It's hilly, it's got sharp turns in it, and the sight lines are not good. It's an accident waiting to happen when you start putting truck after truck coming in and out of that property. I've resided here for 5 years. I'm basically a newcomer. A lot of you have been here your whole lives or close to it. I've come to P&Z meetings in August to see what the lay of the land was. I've seen the commissioners that are here make great judgments, the ones on the Zoom too, where you analyze the balance that's needed between growth of business and quality of life for residents. I've seen it in action. I saw one of you in the proposal at Fountain Square about that large apartment house, and you realized the parking was inadequate. So I've seen that you can do the right thing, and I appreciate that as a taxpayer and as a resident here in Shelton, which this is where I'll be the rest of my life. We've asked for concessions, changes, suggestions to Attorney Thomas. We had a private meeting with him in August. We've come to the meeting in September 18th. Our requests are minimal and reasonable. We are not saying don't do the development, do it responsibly. But the community I represent as president of the HOA, it's a intelligent community, it's a well-financed community, and all they really want is a reasonable approach from you people on the Zoom too, to give us what we need to make this work. Now, I've had interactions with your staff, Alexandria, and all her people. Great responses, got all the information I ever wanted. I don't have any problem with P&Z. I just have a problem with this development not listening to what the neighbors want. It would have been much better if we talked about these things before it was put in front of the P&Z, but it wasn't. What we want to have happen now is you to go to balancing commercial growth with quality of life for the residents. That's about all I have to say. I believe in you as a commission. I think you'll do the right thing, and we'll appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fidel. Ms. Castro,
Thank
is there
you.
anyone else that has signed up to address the commission?
Now, is there anyone else that intended to sign up and hasn't yet? Mr. Douglas?
If there is anyone else that plans to address the commission, please come up to the conference table and sign in on the speaker list.
Chris Douglas, 39 Hawks Ridge Drive. I was gonna not say much, and I don't have a lot to say, other than what Mike just laid out is still remains the same. Our goal has not been to eliminate this development. I would strongly suggest, however, and I'm gonna talk to my fellow residents, that we perhaps maybe do consider pushing for no change in this from an LIP. I strongly disagree with my good friend Dom. I would much prefer a light industrial piece of property there, and I would welcome that piece of property exiting an egress and ingress on Long Hill Cross. I'm calling his bluff because it'll never happen. And the reason it'll never happen is because it's not as lucrative. The developer will never do it because it's not as lucrative. This is all about money. And if any of you read my letter that I wrote called Defining Development Down, you will see that in that letter, this is about this. We've let our standards slip in this town. And as I said last time I was here.
Mr. Douglas, I have to remind
Yes.
you that your comments are to be restricted to the merits of the application.
Okay, so the application is currently a PDD
Mhm.
for an overzealous retail, multiple fast food restaurant development and a hotel. By the way, low-cost extended stay hotel, which nobody in this room would ever rent a room in that hotel.
Mr.
Number one.
Douglas,
So-
please
so-
confine your comments
so-
to the merits of the
so-
application.
So therefore, I believe that it would be best if that piece of property were to remain as it's zoned currently.
Mhm.
That is what I believe. There's been a lot of talk here about how good it would be when it's approved, or if it's approved with the restaurants and the hotel, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not so sure that's the case anymore. What we've asked for here is reasonable. We've been told there's been cooperation. However, we have not seen any cooperation whatsoever. Zero. And so we would like to see some cooperation. This will go a few different ways, right? This can go a few different ways. We can work this out together. It could be jammed through, and we can wind up in appeal. To me, it seems like it's heading that way. I have to say. So anyway, I felt it necessary to say that we're not opposed to it being a light industrial building, because we all know in this country, there's no such thing as smokestacks anymore. So all that's disingenuous. So that's really all I have to say. And I comment what Michael said. I appreciate that the yeoman's work that everybody here does. We're out late, and I know you guys do it all the time, and I appreciate it, and I thank you. And I hope that we can continue to have a good dialogue and make this a better development. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Douglas. Ms. Castro, is there anyone else? All right, if there's
No.
anybody from public who is participating remotely and you would like to address the commission, please use Zoom's raise your hand feature or dial *9.
No one showing. Oh, wait.
Okay, and there was no one else from the audience.
No, not in the public. Hold on, I gotta Zoom.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please identify yourself for the record.
Sure. My name is Val Kuhn, and I live at 172 Wellsview Road in Hawks Ridge Development. And I just want to make a couple of comments for some of the testimony or some of the discussions that occurred tonight. So Attorney Thomas said more than several times that the impact to Hawks Ridge was to 2 homes. I'd like to clarify, it's actually 9 homes that have a visual impact. But in addition to those 9 homes, it's the entire community. So I live on the back side. I'm in one of the villas that's towards the wetlands area. The noise difference is tremendous since the removal of those trees. I mean, night and day difference since the removal of those trees. So that impact is visually to 9 homes, but removal of those trees and whatever is being built there, the noise pollution has impacted the whole development, not just 9 people. In addition to that, some comments were made about other areas that have survived where PDDs went in. A comment about the trailer park on Bridgeport Avenue and how it survived with Walmart, or the condos on Buddington and it survived, with the other builds that were there. I didn't buy at Hawks Ridge to survive. It was, and I plan on it being my final move. And I made the choice to move there, right, based on my understanding of the environment around me. Now, that being said, I support what Mike and Chris said. We're not looking to stop the development. We're looking to be reasonable. When we talk about traffic studies and how, the traffic's not going to be impacted, I work full time. I drive Bridgeport Avenue between 5 and 6 p.m. and I shop on the weekends. I can promise you, when I pull into TJ Maxx, it looks nothing like the maps that have been presented. Nothing. I rarely can find a parking place on Saturday at 10 a.m. And during the week when I'm traveling, even when coming back, I attended in person the last 2 planning and zoning meetings. As I drove home from downtown Shelton up to Long Hill Cross, northbound coming the opposite way, the traffic was dead stop from downtown all the way past Long Hill Cross. And that was at 7 or 8 o'clock at night. Now, that being said, I have no idea if there was an accident on Route 8 or if that was just normal traffic, but that's without further development. I mean, when I travel home from work every day at 6 o'clock at night, I'm sitting in really long lines of traffic by Long Hill Cross, and that's without that development. So all these studies can be made and we can show pictures, but we need to talk about what the peak times are for the residents that live there. And in the last meeting, somebody presented, I think he was from Modern Plastics, saying, traffic's a great thing. I can promise you, when Chick-fil-A opened and that other end of Bridgeport Avenue was a nightmare for a month, I know that I did, and so did other community members shop in other towns. I didn't stay in Shelton. I didn't go to ShopRite in Shelton where I usually shop or Stop and Shop. I avoided that whole section because of the traffic. So I don't think we should underestimate, because it's not just Hawks Ridge. It's for the good of the community of Shelton that needs to be addressed. And as far as the parking, it's a double-edged sword, right? So I talk about pulling into TJ Maxx and not having adequate parking. Also having 650 parking places with asphalt and water drainage is also an issue. And the way to address that is to scale back that development, to make it more reasonable for that plot of land. We can't keep, Marketplace has come up a few times. Guess what? Marketplace is terrible. The parking lot is terrible. There's no trees. It looks like a big asphalt open space. So just because we've done something doesn't mean we should continue to do it. We should be thinking about what's best for the Shelton and the community. We want people to want to move to Shelton. We want the tax revenue. Guess what? Hawks Ridge brings a lot of tax revenue to the town, and we're happy to pay it because we enjoy what we get from Shelton. But we also want some reasonableness in the way that we continue to move forward in the economic development. And I think, Attorney Thomas, you pointed out yourself, we were talking about the POCD, right? And what was going through my mind when we were talking about it was when we came up, harmonizing the neighborhood and making sure that we're developing for what is the right fit. And you saying multiple times that POCD is an advisory document. It's a suggestion, right? But then you really harped on how that it's been that section with the black dots has been identified for future economic development. Well, you don't get it both ways. If we're looking for it as a document or it is an advisory document, that reasonableness needs to be taken into account also for what that land was originally looked at in 2017. I have other comments, but they all kind of keep coming back to the same thing, where we're really looking for the reasonableness of what's being developed there. And I think that one of the more difficult things was for us as a community is that the expectation is that there will be, from a development perspective, that there's rules and guides and it was really astonishing to watch that entire plot of land be decimated and that roots be dug up and pulled out and that curbs be cut in, and all that work was done prior to any approval. And as a layperson, I don't really understand all those legalities. I tried to read as much as I could, and I read things saying if you pull more than 3 trees, you have to have this approval. I really did spend a lot of time reading about it, and everything that I read was, oh boy, this was not handled responsibly. And I would say that's about all I have to say. But thank you for listening, and I appreciate it.
Thank you much, Ms. Kuhn. Okay, anyone else participating remotely, Ms. Castro?
No one else.
Okay, Attorney Thomas, would you like to address any of the comments made?
Hold on.
Okay. Somebody else is coming up.
Okay,
And in case they do, there's no need to interrupt them if they're complimenting me.
Hi, my name is Nadia Twomley. I reside at 101 Wellsview Road. Is it on?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
yes, go ahead.
Okay, so it's too close?
Just bring a little closer.
Okay. So I'll echo what some of my neighbors have said. We know we're not going to stop the development, but what we're asking for is very reasonable. Right now, I love my home. My fear is that once this development is, this quiet, beautiful neighborhood will no longer be a quiet, beautiful neighborhood. I understand the development is below us, and I am down the road. I'm not right at the edge of Long Hill. But the lights, the noise from a Texas Roadhouse restaurant, drive-throughs, imagine those on the summer nights. This quiet neighborhood, as Val has already said, we can hear much more noise than we did before, just with the trees being taken down. We're not opposing the development. We want it done reasonably, responsibly. I don't want to look at, as I pull out of my driveway, something that isn't pretty to look at. I don't want to see dumpsters. I don't want to see, the noise should be, there shouldn't be noise for us to hear. It has to be aesthetically pleasing as we pull out of our home. The traffic, I am deathly concerned about the traffic. I drive in and out of that way 4 to 6 times a day, visiting my dad in Bridgeport, running errands, both south and north. The traffic since Fountain Square has gone in, it's insane on Bridgeport Avenue. So no one can tell me here that with this new development, that isn't going to change, that there is already traffic. I know there is already traffic. It is going to be much worse. My fear is a safety issue on Long Hill. It is a 2-lane road, and it does have curves, and no one abides by the speed limits. So to have the construction done from Long Hill, I am telling you right now, there will be accidents. I am sure of it. So all of this has to be considered, and our quality of life, we are tax-paying residents of Shelton. We deserve to have the quality of life we want in our homes. Again, not opposed to development, but just done responsibly and taking into account our quality of life as we are adjacent to this development. And like it or not, Wellsview community has been built. We are here. This development is not here yet. I thought I heard a couple of comments about the fact that the development can or can't be approved without all the reports from DOT. I have to hope that all the reports from DOT are in prior to approving this development. And also the bit about the storm and the sewage or whatever, that the WAPC, those come after the approval of the development? How's that possible? All of the facts should be known prior to the approval of this kind of development. It's huge. It is huge. It may not be huge to some people and some other developments, but for our community, this is a damn big development. And that will affect our quality of life, and hopefully in a positive way and not a negative way. Because if it's not done well, we are the ones that have to live with it. So I ask respectfully to please consider what we've asked. It's not unreasonable. And I thank you.
Chairwoman, you're all gargled there. We can't hear you.
Thank you, Commissioner Tiki. I was asking that person who just spoke spell her last name.
Oh, spell it? TWAMLEY.
TWAMLEY.
Okay, anyone else, Ms. Castro?
No.
Last call. All right, Attorney Thomas, do you want to respond?
Just to a couple of the points, I tried to be as clear as possible when I make a presentation. And I will clarify that what I said at the earlier meetings was that there would be no main access to this development off of Long Hill Crossroads. I did not say there wouldn't be a construction event, and my point in making it was that the access to the development when finished would be obviously off of Bridgeport Avenue. The issue that Sudell brought up about the upper portion was changed, and it's open to discussion with the commission for this reason. If the PDD extended all the way to the Cinto building, in other words, the entire top, that means under your zoning regulations that the uses that are in the statement of uses and standards become site plan uses on the upper level. So I will take full credit or full blame for the fact that based on prior application here and everything, I did not think the commission wanted to see restaurants and or anything on the upper level. Nor did I think that there's a nice musical accompaniment. Nor did I think that Hawks Ridge would want the same type of uses that were being proposed for the lower level, which they had some issues with, being eligible for site plan approval on the upper portion. Next of all, I thought the commission may have had a concern that the possibility of the upper portion being able to be used, come in with an apartment proposal. It is along the Bridgeport Avenue corridor where the demand remains extremely strong. And the CEOs would like to see more, but the bottom line is, I made the decision, I made the decision. I suggested to my client that the PDD line be pulled back and that left by OIP. Now, as far as the access to it, of course it would have to be. Right now, I can't commit anything to my client, and just throwing away chunks of land when you spend money, everybody points out the fact that it's all about greed. I've been doing this for 45 years. land use, been a lawyer a little longer than that. I have never had a client, and I've had a lot of them, that has walked into my office on a planning and zoning matter and said, Dominic, I'd like you to represent me on this project, I want to lose money on it. Nobody says that. They were in it to make money and to hopefully benefit the community, and most of the developers have done that. Have done that in spades, which is why the taxes and the taxes of everybody in Shelton are extremely low. It's because of that development. So the bottom line is that the upper area was left that way for that reason. What the client is gonna do with it, he realizes that if he did develop it, it would have to be very low impact. There is a house up there that right now he intends on keeping. Residential, right across. And there is certainly could be some discussions on buffers or anything like that. Even if he does decide to do something low impact up there. But we did not think in any way, shape or form, this commission nor Hawks Ridge would want to see 3 more restaurants up there, but they would be site plan approval if the PDD stretched all the way up. And that's why it's important to really understand what section 34 says. So I apologize if anybody misinterpreted it or what I did, but that was the basic reason behind it. It was more protective than anything else. With that, again, if there is concern about the report of Manny Silver and the response of Manny Silver, certainly, and if the commission decides to continue it for that reason, I would hope it would be just to the next meeting, so we can finally conclude this public hearing. Thank you very much.
Okay, Attorney Thomas, any final comments, questions, or concerns from the commission for Attorney Thomas? Okay, hearing none, is there a motion to continue the public hearing?
I think we should. I'll make that motion. Commissioner Herger.
Okay. There's a motion to continue the public hearing from Commissioner Kelly. Is there a second?
Commissioner
Second.
Ticky will second.
Thank you. On the roll call vote on the motion to continue the public hearing made by Commissioner Kelly, seconded by Commissioner Ticky. Commissioner Abel,
Yes.
Commissioner Cristiano,
Aye.
Commissioner Ticky,
Aye.
Commissioner Motto,
Aye.
Commissioner Kelly,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. Motion to continue the public hearing has passed by a vote of 6-0. Staff and I will be getting together to go over the upcoming agendas and to see where this could be slotted. Thank you, everyone. We're moving on to new business. If there are any members of the public in the auditorium that wish to stay for the remainder of the meeting, you're welcome to do so. But if you are exiting, we ask that you do so quietly. Thank you. Okay, the first thing under new business. Application 2431 PDD 72 for Bishop Development of Shelton LLC. Road Assessors Map 12, lot 35. Lot 35 for final subdivision plans for the amendment to PDD number 72. Is there a motion to accept?
Commissioner Ticky will motion to accept.
Thank you. Is there
Commissioner
a
Apple
second?
seconds.
Thank you. All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Let the record show that the vote was 6-0 in favor, with no commissioners voting nay or abstaining. Attorney Thomas, in this particular case, my understanding is that your team was not ready to participate tonight.
Yeah, I wasn't even aware it was gonna be on the agenda. Yeah, we would be prepared to connect. It's just simple final site development plans. So maybe on both of them, we should meet with your staff and everything to review to see if there's any concerns with the plans we filed. Because it's not a non-public hearing matter, we could certainly have a work session before the next time because I'm on the agenda for presentation.
Okay, this will probably not be on until January, just until staff and I sit down and look at everything that has, that's,
Okay, that's understood with the holiday.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
right, that's understood with the holiday, but no, we were not obviously prepared to make a presentation tonight.
Okay. All right, so next is application 2432, Dominic Thomas for Bishop Development of Shelton LLC at 740 River Road, Assessors Map 21, Lot 50 for final site development plans. Is there a motion to accept?
Commissioner Tiki will motion to accept.
And is there a second?
Commissioner Kelly will second it.
Okay. All in favor of the motion to accept application 2432 for review, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Let the record show the vote was 6-0 in favor, with no commissioners voting nay or abstaining. Next is application 2433, Dominic Thomas for David A. Chukta at 0 Constitution Boulevard and 0 Wybosset Street, Assessors Map 92, Lot 65 and 85, Assessors Map 78, Lot 123, and Assessors Map 93, Lot 1, for an application for a special exception to allow 23 cluster single-family homes under Schedule A, Use Line 1D, Design Residential District. Is there a motion to accept for review and to set a public hearing?
Commissioner Kelly will make that motion.
Is there a second?
I'll
Commissioner
second,
Tiki.
Commissioner Madam.
Is that Commissioner Amato?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So on the motion to accept application 2433 for review made by Commissioner Kelly and seconded by Commissioner Amato, and also to set a public hearing. All those in favor, by saying aye.
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 Any abstentions? Any opposed? Let the record show that the vote was 6-0 in favor, with no commissioners voting nay or abstaining. Moving on to old business, application 2416, Dominic Thomas for Daybreak Ridge LLC for a text amendment to Shelton Planning and Zoning Commission, Regulation Section 34.1. My understanding is a letter of extension was submitted today. Is that correct, Attorney Thomas?
Oh. Yes, it was.
Okay, so is there a motion to table discussion on this particular application at this time?
Commissioner
Kelly
Tiki,
make the motion.
I'm happy to second it.
Good. Moving on.
All right. So Commissioner Kelly, are you making the motion? Commissioner Tiki is seconding, tabling discussion?
That is correct.
Okay, so on a roll call vote, Commissioner Amato,
Aye.
Commissioner Apple,
Aye.
Commissioner Tiki,
Aye.
Commissioner Kelly,
Aye.
Commissioner Cristiano,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. Motion to table discussion of application 2416 has passed by a vote of 6-0. Final agenda item was to be an executive session, but that has been canceled. And seeing that there is no other item on the agenda, chair declares this meeting is adjourned as of 8:40 p.m. Everyone, and good night.